Hello and welcome to another standard video. Today we are revisiting the red-white Firebender Ascension aggro deck, which has gotten a few upgrades with Lorwyn and now with Ninja Turtles as well. So our centerpiece is still this 2-mana enchantment that makes a 2/2 soldier token with Firebending 1, so we get a red mana when it attacks, and then whenever a creature we control with an attack trigger attacks, we get a counter on the Ascension. At 4 or more counters, we get to re-enable those attack triggers an additional time. So almost every creature in this deck has some sort of attack trigger, including of course the soldier token itself, which is also very synergistic with our 1-drops. Hardclaw gets to deal damage when it attacks, can sink a red mana into the ability, where we can now put a +1 counter on Hardclaw if our opponent lost life, and the Stadium Headliner with Mobilize can make an extra warrior token when it attacks, and then can also maybe sacrifice it using that firebending mana to deal damage to an opposing creature equal to the number of creatures we control. And then we've got more Mobilizing at 2 mana with Voice of Victory, just an inherently powerful creature, preventing the opponent from playing spells in our turn, but then especially with a leveled up Ascension, getting to make 4 warrior tokens with a single attack can be incredibly powerful. And then especially when paired with Arabella, those mobilized tokens can get the game over with very quickly, because when Arabella attacks, it deals X damage to each opponent, and we gain X life, where X is the number of creatures we control with power 2 or less. So this can get out of hand very quickly once we start doubling all these triggers with a leveled up Ascension, or perhaps with Delney, Streetwise Lookout. I'm now playing the full set as a creature that allows our smaller creatures to sneak past larger creatures from the opponent. As long as they have power 2 or less, they cannot be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, and if an ability of a creature we control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So this kind of acts like a fully leveled up Firebender Ascension, but is also very powerful in conjunction with a fully powered Ascension, as we now potentially get to double dip twice. So then a single creature attacking with Mobilize or Arabella can essentially get the game over with by itself. And then we also have the full set of the Sentry from Lorwyn, a 2/2 with First Strike and a lifelink. Reasonable stats, but also has a nice attack trigger, where we now get to put a creature card with mana value X or less from our hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking, where X is the number of attacking creatures we control. So this is also very synergistic with mobilized creatures, since we can first resolve the mobilized trigger, get some attacking tokens, and then resolve the Sentry's trigger, where we can now put something more expensive into play. So even on turn 3, if we curved a turn 1 Headliner into a turn 2 Sentry, we could potentially put a 3-drop into play for free, and that's where I'm now playing the full set of Werefox Bodyguard, as it's a very powerful card to cheat and play for free, as we can exile an opposing creature when it enters, have to say a non-Fox creature specifically, so changelings aren't allowed. So this can potentially clear a path for our creatures to attack unopposed, and it's also incredibly synergistic with Delney, since with Delney in play, the Bodyguard can now exile 2 creatures when it enters, so curving a 1-drop into Sentry into Delney, and then having a Bodyguard in hand can be a complete blowout, especially against all the green decks that don't tend to have a lot of creature interaction. And then we also have 2 copies of the Sanguine Evangelist, which also has a lot of synergies throughout. We're going wide with Mobilize, and Battle Cry is another attack trigger that synergizes with Ascension and with Delney, so we get to maybe enable that several times and pump up all our tokens. Just have to be careful that the Battle Cry doesn't get our creatures to 3 or 4 power, at which point they are no longer unblockable with Delney's ability, so that's just something to keep in mind. But usually we can resolve Arabella's trigger before the Battle Cry, so we still get the maximum damage from it. And then we also have 2 copies of Raph and Leo, Sibling Rivals, a 2/4, saying when it attacks, if it's the first combat phase of the turn, we get to untap 1 or 2 target attacking creatures, and then after this phase, there's an additional combat phase. Now do keep in mind that it specifically says if it's the first combat phase of the turn, so it's not like we're going to get to chain together infinite attacks if we double those triggers with Delney or an Ascension, but getting to untap 4 creatures as opposed to 2 can make a difference, especially if we're then also doubling an extra Arabella trigger or Voice of Victory, mobilizing additional tokens, so still quite synergistic throughout, and also very powerful with Delney, as it can potentially sneak past larger creatures. So I've still liked the inclusion here, but definitely not a must-have. And as a legendary creature, we don't necessarily want to have too many copies either, as opposed to Delney, where it's kind of the centerpiece of the deck alongside the Ascension. And then our mana base also has a couple utility lands with the Encampment, essentially giving us mobilize stapled onto a land, where we get to make some attacking warrior tokens. And we also have a one-off bivouac, a creature with an attack trigger, giving us an additional +1 counter, so this can also come in handy in the grindier matchups, especially against control. Otherwise, we do have plenty of red-white dual lands, with the Inspiring Vantage still in standard, and then Sacred Foundry and Sunbillow Verge. So the mana base is actually pretty solid, and we don't need to resort to multiversal passages or starting towns, which is always nice. So yeah, for now, let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with keepable hands. Might risk flooding a bit here if we draw more lanes. At least we have a few utility lanes we could also draw. But yeah, got a good 1, 2, 3 start. Could also be in trouble if our opponent's got a Banter Mole Cub, because that's going to give them a very explosive opening. Yep. Alright, well, we better draw our bodyguard to maybe clean up some creatures. For now, I can attack, threaten to pump if they block, and then maybe play Arabella second main. And then Arabella plus Delney is a pretty good combo as well. Don't know if we'll have time to play Raph and Leo first, because that could potentially set up a one-hit KO if we get to attack with Delney as well. Ooh, Scrap Shooter can destroy artifacts. But I guess they didn't give us the extra card. And another one. So, yeah, opponent could have totally destroyed Arabella, but didn't. So now what? If I play Delney, we get a clean attack in. I might actually go for Raph first. Or play Delney with a plan of playing Ascension to double our triggers. Yeah, that could also work. Yeah, let's just go for Delney. And then for now it doesn't matter in which order we stack them. So yeah, we'll see. Scrap Shooter's attack. Take 10. And a Headliner's not bad either. So can play Ascension, play Headliner. And yeah, this attack is just lethal. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have a powerful hand, just hoping for land number 3 to play Delney. And then we're off to the races. Could maybe start with the Sentry, so we can put more creatures into play. Turn 1 Pollinator from our opponent, so yeah, the Banter Mole decks are out in force. A mono green so far. Alright, I think Sentry gets the nod here over Arabella. Although Arabella also has potential with Delney, but maybe we can put Arabella into play next turn. And then no attacks. Could have tried attacking first, but if they double block, we would have to pump just to take out a Weaver. Not sure if that was worth it. Okay, opponent's going pretty wide here. And they could soon have enough mana to cast a Craterhoof Behemoth, but Bodyguard was an awesome top deck. So play Delney. Now I only have 2 creatures attacking here, and our opponents can use the Wild Guide to block Hard Claw. But we will get 2 triggers, so I can first put in Arabella, and then put in the Bodyguard. And the Bodyguard triggers twice. Exile Wild Guide, exile Weaver. Unless we want to exile another potential blocker. Yeah, maybe exiling Lenor Elves makes more sense then. or even Pollinator. But yeah, opponent's just gonna scoop it up here. The double bodyguard trigger is just too much for them to handle. This turn we get some nice damage in, but especially next turn, doubling Arabella's trigger is gonna be game over. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw, missing a 1-drop, but I think we still have enough going for us here. Turn 1 Sleight of Hand, so maybe Spell Elementals. So then they could eventually wipe our board. If our opponent passes, they could still Spell Snare, Voice of Victory. But we've got another one. Opponent opts. And Voice resolves. Another Sleight of Hand, so that's a third spell in the graveyard. But at least Voice makes it so they can't play Adimurk Crab in our turn. So that is pretty relevant. Hoping for land number 3. And Burst Lightning Face, just to discount their spells. And we drew a third land. Alright, so this is a big turn. I think it's an Ascension turn. So we can start leveling that up. And play Hardclaw versus Evangelist isn't terrible. Yeah, what's our goal here? I think it's just to get an Ascension to level 4. And yeah, could maybe get there next turn. The extra red mana can be used on Hardclaw. Opponent with a Hearth Elemental, and that's it. Okay, so next turn they could Thunderflock bounce my board. But it's not going to bounce the Ascension, at least. So what's our best play? Certainly it's to attack all out and get Ascension to 4 counters. They can take out the Voice. We still get some damage in. Question is whether I play another Ascension first. And I don't hate it. And then I could play another Voice to make sure they don't have another 1 mana instant they can play end of turn. Or we go for Arabella, where if they don't remove it, it can wreak havoc on our opponent next turn. Although another Voice honestly is pretty good too. So we'll try this. And then put Voice Trigger last. Get a bunch more triggers. Copy the Voice to make extra tokens. So we'll see if they have the Thunderflock here. Winter Night Stories, alright, so they don't seem to have one yet. Maybe regretting not going for Arabella now. But having Voice in play makes cards like Spell Snare a lot less effective, so we can make sure Arabella resolves. And main phase Crab, just to have an extra blocker. Yeah, that's probably not going to be good enough, especially now with Delney. Attack all out. Make sure the Voice triggers are last, but yeah, we're going to get to trigger every ability multiple times between double Ascension and Delney. So this is quite the blowout. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. We have Sentry plus Voice to maybe cheat out a Bodyguard. I'll take a 1-drop off at the top. Third land could also be useful. Facing blue-white. Which flavor of blue-white looks like control so far? Well, establishing a Voice would be nice if it resolves. So if they have a counter spell, this is bad. If they just have like a Get Lost as removal, this would waste their mana. So it's a tough call. The alternative is maybe go for Ascension first, get that going. Let's go for Voice. They would need a 2-mana counterspell specifically, which they did have, sadly. If they just had 2-mana removal spell and a 3-mana counterspell, that play would have worked out pretty well. Raph and Leo could be next. Uses up all my mana. Opponent says no. It's gonna be one of those games. Yeah, blue-white control with board wipes is gonna make things tough, even though Bodyguard can maybe be used against it. This is likely their Consult the Star Charts turn, so we wanna cast things that we can hopefully resolve. Sentry could be a way around more counter spells, but now I'm mostly concerned about sweepers as well. So, yeah, either way, Headliner can test out the waters. Yeah, Sentry can help cheat out Bodyguard, but against control, that's not particularly helpful. So maybe I do try the Ascension first. Opponent had the Spell Snare as well. At least they didn't draw any extra cards that turn, but now Stock Up can do so. So yeah, we're totally getting buried. This is going to be a very one-sided game. Now we can double spell 2-drops at least. But that's probably when our opponent lets it resolve, casts Day of Judgment, and gets another 2 or 3 for 1. No, they actually had another counterspell. So that kind of implies that they don't have a sweeper in hand, which leaves more card draw, counterspells, and spot removal perhaps. Alright, so now we could try and use the Bodyguard to protect our stuff. Or we can try Delney, which is unlikely to work out here. So let's start by attacking, see what happens. Make sure we mobilize before Arabella resolves. And the Librarian for 3, we get to exile with the Bodyguard. And before blockers. Could have also used the Headliner, to be fair, just to deal 1 damage before it gets the counters. But assuming they still don't have a sweeper, this allows us to keep up the pressure. Consult with Kicker, can still maybe get lost to deal with Bodyguard. Opponent's already cast 3 No More Lies, so what are the odds that they have a 4th? Because if Delney resolves, this is a lot of damage with the extra Mobilize and Arabella trigger. If they have a Get Lost, then holding on to the Bodyguard could pay off. Because if I go for Delney, opponent just removes Arabella and then plays a board wipe next turn. That's going to leave us in a pretty difficult position. So I'm kind of expecting a Get Lost before attackers. And now I have to decide what I want to do. Bodyguards Arabella, or let it happen to get the map tokens. I think I Bodyguard here. And then I can always sacrifice a Bodyguard to get my creature back at any point. Yeah. So then I can sack the Bodyguard, they get back Librarian, but it also dies. And I will be left with an Arabella. Which by itself doesn't do much. Delney does make it a little bit better. So if they have another No More Lies, I guess Sentry first. They probably just have another Get Lost. Alright, they actually had the No More Lies. What is that, 5? But that's probably the lowest they're gonna go. Alright, we do get to untap, and encampment's not bad. So if their plan is just activate anchorage, it's maybe not gonna work. So make sure Arabella's last. Okay, did we somehow get there? We did, wow. Well, against all odds, we still managed to beat blue-white control. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a fine hand. Got a 1, 2, 3 curve with some interaction if we need it. And I think this is the Momo white deck, if you will, with a bunch of flying creatures and Momo to discount them. They will have some cheap removal like Seam Rip. Let's see if they have a turn 2 Momo, which is their best start with a Spring Leaf. Can go Momo into the Monk that makes an extra token. Looks like the Shepherd is gonna maybe find Momo. Or Pixie. Can still cast it, pick up the Shepherd, which is pretty good value. Okay, for now, I guess we don't have a great attack. Play Arabella and pass. Delney would be a great draw. Maybe a Sentry to help us put more creatures into play. The Ascension, of course. So we've got some pretty good draws available. Opponent runs back the Shepherd for another Pixie. They could have also gotten a Plains, so they must already have one in hand. Alright, never mind. Opponent declining to get an extra land. But our opponent does now have a pair of 2/2 blockers. Could still bodyguard exile 1, so Arabella can attack. Or we can get the Evangelist down to set up a better attack next turn, which I don't mind. So now we might see them enable some of their 3-drops that want you to cast 2 spells in 1 turn. Shepherd warped for a 3rd time. For another Pixie. Gonna run it back. Can still float a white mana. Okay. And a Figure of Fable, powerful mana sink. But yeah, we can set up our bodyguard. Could play Headliner, attack. Probably want to bodyguard before Arabella's trigger resolves. Or I can wait to see how they block to maybe save Arabella. I think I'm still happy playing the Headliner. Can also use it to take out an opposing creature for 2 mana. And then we should have decent attacks overall. So first Mobilize, then Battle Cry. And can maybe punish a double block on Arabella. Although of course I know about the Headliner. So opponent just taking some simple trades. Do I wanna bodyguard now? Since we have another one, I don't really mind. So I can just save the Evangelist. Had I played bodyguard before attacking, we get 1 more damage, but then they can still make this trade with the other Pixie. So I didn't hate the sequencing. Shepherd is back. Yeah, I wonder what kind of cards our opponent has in hand. Maybe another Shepherd. The animals could technically destroy our artifact, Arabella, but Seam Rip can maybe get rid of it instead. We do have another copy, although the farm animals could get rid of the second Arabella. So maybe we're just looking to close out the game as is. Can bodyguard the Pixie, attack, still use Headliner. Yeah, that seems fine. And we'll see how they block. Otherwise, we still get to play Arabella second main. Trade. That's fine. So that has us getting in for 4. And playing Arabella, which they now don't technically have an answer to anymore. So we'll see if they can stabilize. Shepherd again. Yeah, maybe their hand was just a bunch of Starfield Shepherds. Now they could still play the 2-3 lifelink Monk, make an extra copy, but then Arabella would still kill them before they get a chance to gain life. Get lost the bodyguard, get back Pixie. And what's the plan? I guess picking up Seam Rip is a pretty nice play, so I'm kind of surprised they scooped it up here, because they could have returned Seam Rip, we lose an Arabella to the legendary rule, and then they can still recast Seam Rip to get rid of the extra one, and then we would have been left with Bodyguard, 2 Bats, and our opponent with a 2-2 Pixie. So yeah, that wouldn't have been terrible, but I guess we also have the map tokens now. But yeah, I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Hardclaw would have been even better as our 1-mana Mobilize card, so we could cheat out Evangelist with the Sentry. But we'll see how the game develops. Can still just cast him normally, and then maybe cheat out the second Evangelist. And Delney would be a great draw. Especially alongside another 2-drop, because then we can use Sentry to put in the 2-drop and then still the 3-drop afterwards. Opponent's on a rampy green deck, and Bodyguards was a useful draw. So we get to attack. And then ideally use Sentry to put in the Bodyguard for free, as opposed to having to cast it. Opponent passing with 3 mana up. Possible they have a protection spell. So I think we'll just attack and then play Evangelist second main. Sadly, nothing to put in play for free. But yeah, next turn, free Bodyguard looks great. It's gonna be I still get back the fetch lanes. But yeah, we get to apply maximum pressure, and we found Delney. Yeah, that's a blowout. So play Delney. Tackle out. And then I get to put 2 more creatures into play here. So this order is fine. So we also get the battle cry on the creatures that just entered. Bodyguard triggers twice, thanks to Delney. Exile both of your creatures. And by the way, 1 more Evangelist. Is this just lethal? Kinda looks like it. And yeah, her opponent explodes. Yeah, the green matchup, thanks to Bodyguard, is looking pretty decent. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a promising hand. Headliner is great with the Sentry. Could even put in a 3-drop for free. Turn 1 Swamp. into Intimidation Tactics. Well, at least we've got all 2-drops, so they can't really slow down our curve too much. Takes the Sentry, and now Ascension is probably our preferred play. The extra mana could be useful for Headliner next turn. And we want to get the counters going. So you could still cast a 2-drop and maybe activate Headliner. And Bandit's Talent, I see. Opponent making us discard. Both our creatures are quite good. Which one's better? I might prefer Voice, just because Arabella's legendary as well. So we might draw another. So play Voice, attack. And then next turn we have a completed Ascension. And I might still play the Encampment, even though it gives him a bit more info. I would rather have this in play than an extra Sacred Foundry, if they make us discard again. Opponent takes out our 2/2. Levels up the talents. But yeah, we're pretty happy with how things are going. Can now activate the Encampment. Gotta make sure to do so before we attack. Attack, and then make sure to get the Voice trigger last. So we get to double it with the Ascension. That's a lot of tokens. Opponent falls to 4. Maybe a Day of the Black Sun to wipe our board. A Momentum Breaker gets the Headliner. Do they have another one? They do not, and Voice of Victory goes the distance. Awesome. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw. This hand would love to draw a 1-drop on turn 1, so we can maybe enable the Sentry to put in a 2-drop. Otherwise, we can maybe still use the Mobilize tokens from Voice to enable the Sentry further. Turn 1 starting town, and Intimidation Tactics, so opponent gets to rip apart our hand. Delney is definitely the most unique effect, and currently our only 3-drop. Goes for the Voice, and draw another one. Okay, I guess we could start there. Opponent blue-black, it seems, so control deck. They could have some counter spells in hand here. Intimidation Tactics, I guess, was played in the Doomsday Excruciator combo deck as well. I don't think they had many counter spells, to be fair. More likely to have instant speed removal. Consult. Okay. Now Fountain Port. If they're running Fountain Port, they can be on Doomsday Excruciator. So it's just blue-black control. 3 steps disabled by the Voice. Needs to just draw discard. So now we're mostly worried about a board wipe. Day of Black Sun for X equals 2 is a reason to go for Delney here. And then at 5 mana, of course, there's the cover-up as well. Opponent getting rid of another counterspell. And double Voice triggers. So pretty healthy attack. Although if they just remove the Voice, Delney doesn't do a whole lot by itself. So yeah, next turn is where we need to watch out for cover-up. Bodyguard, typically not great against control, but it would allow us to maybe save a creature from a sweeper. And we draw another Sentry. Yeah, I don't think I have the luxury of holding back, I just have to commit. Which probably means we lose if they have the board wipe. So maybe try Arabella first. Alright, just shooting Delney. And Demolition Field could also deal with our utility land. We did actually draw a bodyguard. Okay, so can play Sentry before attacking, just to power up Arabella, or we can use the Sentry trigger to put it in. Although if they still maybe change their minds and use a removal spell, I guess it's better to just cast the Sentry. It's not like I'm using the mana for anything else. So yeah, trigger Arabella, wouldn't be putting the bodyguard into play here. Even though it could have dealt one more damage. Gonna keep it to play around removal. Okay, Librarian for 1. So it doesn't actually block anything profitably. Can just soak up an attack from Arabella. Opponent still takes 2. I think that's fine. Opponent's just trumping the Sentry. Alright, so kind of implies a board wipe is incoming. A River Regent Hardcast instead. Can bounce 2 of our creatures. But now Bodyguard exiles Regent and we attack for lethal. So that worked out. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a decent hand. Claw into Voice. Have some removal. Arabella, perfect with Voice to deal more damage. Even have an encampment as a decent mana sink. Facing tapped Multiversal Passage. So Delney would be a great draw. Opponent is blue-black with a Drowner. So Dimir midrange. Alright, for now attack. Can pump Hard Claw and then Arabella second main. Which also blocks a Drowner well, so they can ninjutsu a Kaito, which would be the main concern. Another tapped Passage, and another main phase Drowner. Locking down the Hard Claw this time. Okay, so yeah, we can attack and even punish a double block. I wouldn't be using the encampment, although it was a reasonable option as well. And this is kind of a blowout. Now, of course, if they do remove the bodyguard, they do get the Drowner back and get to trigger it again. But yeah, looks like our opponent has given up. So a quick win here against a Dimir midrange gets us all the way to Diamond. So yeah, this Boros Ascension deck cannot be underestimated. Of course, it helps when you're on the play, since our deck lacks cheap removal spells, and we don't have any haste creatures either, so it's really all about getting on the board quickly, and then hopefully staying ahead of whatever the opponent is trying to do. But that's also where the bodyguard is useful at potentially clearing a path, especially if we can then also put it in play for free with a Sentry, or even trigger it twice with Delney in play. That's how we can potentially catch back up if we're behind. And at least the bodyguard is not useless against control, because as the name implies, it can also save your own creatures from a sweeper effect, as we were able to see. So yeah, overall quite happy with where this deck ended up. It's the type of deck that can easily pick up new cards with future expansions, as long as it's a red or white creature with mana value 3 or less that has some sort of attack trigger. It has a decent chance of making it in. So for now, I want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.